The orbital station known as the Spire hung in the void like a needle of spun glass and titanium, rotating slowly against the crushing sapphire backdrop of the gas giant Veil. It was a masterpiece of neutral engineering, a place designed to make every species in the known galaxy feel equally unwelcome and equally awed. Outside, the radiation belts of the planet shimmered in bands of violent violet and deep indigo. Inside, the air smelled of ozone, recycled jasmine, and the nervous sweat of 100 different species trying not to start a war. Ambassador Mason Hale adjusted the cuffs of his suit for the 10th time. He was a man built for boardrooms and handshakes, with a jawline that suggested stubbornness and eyes that suggested he was currently terrified. He stood on the central podium of the Grand Atrium, a cavernous space where the walls were screens projecting holographic banners that rippled like stained glass. They displayed the crests of the Galactic Council, a chaotic mosaic of shapes and colors meant to symbolize unity. Hale cleared his throat. The sound was amplified, echoing across the tiers of floating seating pods where delegates from a dozen sectors watched him with compound eyes, thermal sensors, and cold, human-like stares. "We stand today at a threshold," Hale said, his voice practiced, projecting a confidence he did not feel. "For 3 centuries, humanity has looked at the stars and seen only distance. Today, we look at the Council and see neighbors. The treaty we propose is not merely ink on paper or data on a drive. It is a promise that the Sol system is ready to listen, to trade, and to stand as an equal pillar in this great assembly." He paused, letting the translation bots catch up. The air shimmered as the holographic banners shifted from red to a soothing, diplomatic gold. Among the crowd, standing near the edge of the dignitaries' circle, Saren Voss watched the human with an intensity that would have made a lesser man stutter. She was the Council's liaison, a title that meant everything and nothing. She was tall, her physiology humanoid but distinctly alien, with skin the color of polished moonlight and eyes that lacked pupils, glowing instead with a faint bioluminescent teal. She wore ceremonial armor made of metal silk, a fabric that flowed like water when she moved but hardened to diamond density upon impact. She did not clap when Hale finished. She simply blinked, her long, pale lashes sweeping down once. Slow and deliberate, she was reading him. She read the micro-tremor in his left hand. She read the way his pulse throbbed against the collar of his shirt. She read the hope in him, and worse, the naivety. As the applause scattered through the room, polite, restrained, distinctively bureaucratic, Hale stepped down from the podium. He looked flushed with the adrenaline of the moment. He made his way through the press of bodies, his security detail struggling to keep a perimeter around him in the chaos of the post-speech reception. Saren intercepted him near the entrance to the delegate lounge. She moved without seeming to walk, gliding through the crowd as if the air itself parted to accommodate her. "Ambassador," Saren said. Her voice was melodic but carried an undertone of steel. "That was a very optimistic speech," Hale smiled, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. "Liaison Voss, I was told cynicism was the lingua franca of the Council, but I had hoped to introduce a new dialect. Optimism is dangerous here," she said, falling into step beside him. "It blinds you to the knives. You did well. However, the Meridian block stopped checking their stock tickers for 12 seconds. That is a standing ovation by their standards." Hale chuckled, looking around the glittering room. "I will take what I can get." A drone, small and shaped like a gilded beetle, buzzed down from the upper levels and hovered at Hale's shoulder. It chimed softly, extending a tray. On the tray lay a physical envelope, made of heavy, cream-colored paper, sealed with distinct wax emblems. Hale frowned, picking it up. Physical mail. That is archaic even for Earth. The drone chirped and zipped away. Hale turned the envelope over. It bears the High Council seals, he murmured, impressed. A private cultural invitation. They want to show me the stellar viewing gallery on the lower ring. A gesture of good faith, it says. Saren stopped walking. Her luminous eyes narrowed slightly, the light within them dimming. May I see that, Ambassador? Hale handed it to her. She ran a long, slender finger over the wax seal. She did not look at the paper. She looked at the texture of the wax, the specific weight of the cardstock. The seal is excellent, she said quietly. Almost perfect. But the Council uses a wax blend that smells faintly of sulfur to prevent replication by synthetic printers. This smells of lavender. Hale stiffened. A forgery? A lure, Saren corrected. She handed it back to him with 2 fingers, as if it were radioactive. Seals are easy to counterfeit in a corrupt galaxy. Ambassador, if I were you, I would return to your shuttle and lock the door until the treaty is signed. I cannot do that, Hale said, straightening his spine. If I hide from a cultural overture, I look weak. If I look weak, the treaty dies in committee, I have to go. My security team is top tier. Saren looked at the human security guards flanking him, large men in Kevlar weaves, looking at the alien crowd with aggression rather than awareness. They are hammers, she said. You are walking into a room full of scalpels. I will be fine. Liaison Voss, Hale said, his tone final. But I appreciate the concern. He walked away, signaling his team to follow. Saren watched him go, a cold knot of certainty tightening in her chest. She tapped her comlink, intending to call station security, but the line hissed with static. She looked up at the holographic banners. For a split second, they flickered, the gold light turning a sickly, bruising purple before correcting itself. It was already happening. Hale followed the coordinates on the invitation card. It led him away from the bustling atrium, down a series of turbolifts that moved too fast, dropping into the station's lower bowels. The polished titanium walls gave way to industrial gray plating. The air grew colder, smelling less of jasmine and more of recycled engine coolant. This does not look like a viewing gallery, the lead security officer grunted, his hand resting on the pulse rifle at his hip. It is likely a private entrance, Hale said, though his voice wavered. The elite prefer discretion. They turned a corner into a long service corridor. The lighting here was wrong. It did not just dim, it stuttered. The shadows seemed to detach themselves from objects and move independently. The hum of the station's gravity generators dropped an octave, vibrating in their teeth. Hold! The security lead barked. We are turning back. The reality of the corridor seemed to ripple. It was a projection loop, Hale realized too late. The empty hallway they were walking down dissolved, the holographic overlay vanishing to reveal the truth. They were not in a hallway. They were in a loading bay, and they were not alone. Vents in the ceiling bloomed open like metallic flowers. Contact! The guard screamed, raising his rifle. He never fired. Small, spherical drones dropped from the vents, moving with insectile speed. They did not shoot bullets. They fired molecular pins, thin needles of glass that shattered on impact and released a neuroparalytic gas. The guards dropped instantly, their bodies seizing, muscles locked in rigid screams. Hale stumbled back, gasping, covering his mouth with his hand. He fumbled for his comm badge, tapping it frantically. Emergency! This is Ambassador Hale. I am under... A shadow detached itself from the wall. It was a figure suited in matte black armor that absorbed the light, faceless and sleek. The figure moved with terrifying silence, stepping over the twitching bodies of the guards. "Please," Hale whispered, backing until he hit a cold bulkhead. "I have diplomatic immunity. This is an act of war." The figure did not speak. It reached out, its gauntlet glowing with a soft, red energy. It touched Hale's neck. There was no pain, only a sudden, profound silence. Hale's body went limp, his consciousness trapped inside a frozen shell. He stared straight ahead, unable to blink, unable to breathe. The figure reached down and grabbed Hale's left hand. With a brutal, efficient yank, it tore the heavy platinum signet ring from his finger, the ring that verified his identity and his status as Earth's representative. The figure held the ring up to the flickering light, then nodded to the drones. Two of the machines descended, clamping onto Hale's shoulders, lifting his paralyzed form into the air. They drifted toward a waiting shuttle that sat in the dark corner of the bay, its engines purring with a stealth drive hum. On the station's security grid, the footage of the event was being rewritten in real time. The feed showed no drones, no paralysis, no struggle. It showed Mason Hale stopping his guards, dismissing them with a wave of his hand, and walking willingly, eagerly, into the shuttle of an unidentified private contractor. It showed him handing over his ring as payment. It looked exactly like a defection. 4 hours later, on Earth, the mood in the Situation Room deep beneath Geneva was not one of panic, but of suffocating fury. The holographic display in the center of the table played the altered footage on a loop. Hale, smiling, digitally manipulated but flawless, stepping onto the ship. Hale, turning his back on his guards. Hale, abandoning his planet. "This is a lie," General Kincaid said, slamming his fist onto the table. The wood cracked, but the hologram didn't flicker. "We know Hale. He has a wife in Chicago and a mortgage he worries about. He did not defect." The Secretary General sat at the head of the table, her face a mask of exhaustion. "It does not matter what we know, General. It matters what the galaxy sees. The footage has been leaked to every news outlet from here to the Orion Spur. If we send the fleet to retrieve him, we are invading sovereign space to rescue a traitor. The treaty collapses, war begins. Then we tell the truth," Kincaid argued. "We tell them he was taken. And admit we cannot protect our own ambassador on a council station," the Secretary General countered. "We look weak. The treaty collapses. We are checkmated." The room fell silent. The hum of the ventilation system sounded like a countdown. "We have a third option," a voice said from the shadows in the corner. A man stepped forward. He wore a gray suit that cost more than the general's annual salary, and he held a data pad with 2 fingers. This was Director Vance of the Intelligence Directorate. "We cannot send the military," Vance said calmly. "We cannot send a diplomat. So we send something that does not officially exist." He slid the data pad across the table. It spun and stopped in front of the Secretary General. On the screen was a single file, marked with a black classification stamp and one word: Ninja. "This is the project you shut down 10 years ago," the Secretary General said, looking up at Vance. "You said it was too unstable, too old-fashioned." "I said it was too dangerous for peacetime," Vance corrected. "We are not in peacetime anymore. The abductors are a group called the Velvet Chain. They are not standard pirates. They are high-end slavers who cater to the galactic elite. They sell people as art, as pets, as curiosities. They have Hale. They will sell him, and when they do, they will break him until he confirms whatever narrative the buyers want." The Secretary General looked at the file again. She tapped the screen. The image of a man appeared. He looked unremarkable in the photo, dark eyes, black hair, a face that you would forget the moment you looked away. "Is he ready?" she asked. Vance smiled, a thin, humorless expression. He has been ready since he was 6 years old. Deep in the gravity well of a training facility buried beneath the lunar surface of Earth's moon, the air was heavy enough to crush bone. The gravity was set to 3 times Earth standard. Kaito Ryu stood in the center of the dojo, a stark white room with no corners, only curved walls. He was stripped to the waist, his body a map of lean muscle and old scars. He was breathing slowly, his heart rate impossibly low for the crushing weight pressing down on him. Around him, 6 combat drones circled like sharks. These were not the sluggish security drones of the station. These were military-grade interceptors, armed with high-impact micro-rounds. "Begin," Kaito whispered. The air exploded with noise. The drones fired in unison. Kaito did not run. He flowed. He moved like water poured over stone, like a shadow that had learned the physics of mercy and discarded them. He twisted his torso, and 3 rounds missed his ribs by a millimeter. He dropped to one knee, the floor cracking under the impact of his weight in the high gravity, and spun. He did not use a gun. He held a bokken, a wooden practice sword, but it was made of a hyper-dense polymer alloy. He struck. The sound was a sharp crack, like lightning hitting a tree. The first drone shattered. Its sensor eye caved in. Kaito used the momentum of the strike to vault backward, flipping over the second drone's line of fire. He landed softly, impossibly softly, and thrust the tip of the bokken into the third drone's intake vent. It was a dance of violence. Silence, strike, move, silence, strike, move. Within 20 seconds, the 6 drones lay in sparking heaps on the floor. Kaito stood amidst the wreckage, his chest heaving slightly, sweat dripping from his chin to the white floor. The blast doors hissed open. The gravity normalized with a sickening lurch. But Kaito didn't stumble. Vance walked in, clapping slowly. "You are favoring your left side," Vance said. "And you are late," Kaito replied. He grabbed a towel and wiped his face. His voice was rough, unused. "Why are you here, Vance? You usually send a courier. We have a situation," Vance said. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He activated a wall screen showing the footage of Hale. Kaito watched it once. "Fake," he said immediately. "His gait is wrong. He is leading with his hip, not his knee. He is being carried or compelled." "Smart," Vance said. He was taken by the Velvet Chain. They disguise trafficking as contract relocation. They make the desperate and the naive sign their lives away, or they just take them and forge the signature later. "Hale is being sold." Kaito lowered the towel. He looked at the image of the terrified diplomat hidden behind the digital mask of a traitor. "Why me? You have SEAL teams. You have Rangers. We cannot send an army," Vance said. "We need a ghost. We need someone who can walk through walls, infiltrate the most secure slave markets in the sector, and bring Hale back before he is converted into a puppet. If you get caught, you do not exist. If you die, we will not bury you." Kaito looked at his hands. He had spent a lifetime turning them into weapons. He had trained in the old ways, the ways of silence and misdirection, enhanced by technology that the public didn't know existed. "When do I leave?" Kaito asked. "Tonight," Vance said. He handed Kaito a data chip. "This contains everything we know about the Velvet Chain. It is not much. They are rumors wrapped in nightmares." Kaito took the chip. He didn't look at it. He looked at Vance. Vance paused at the door. He looked back at his weapon. His ninja. "Galactic slavers took a human diplomat hostage," Vance said, testing the weight of the words. And Earth answered with a ninja. "It has a ring to it." "Just get me a ship," Kaito said, turning back to the darkness of the room. Kaito departed 2 hours later. His vessel was a single-pilot stealth skiff, a sliver of void black engineering wrapped in light-bending film. It had no weapon systems, no shields, and no markings. It carried only fuel, supplies, and a crate of tools that could not be traced to any factory on Earth. Inside the cockpit, the silence was absolute. Kaito sat in the pilot's harness, the interface jacks plugged into the neural ports at the base of his skull. He was one with the ship, feeling its thrusters as if they were his own muscles. He pulled up the mission files on the HUD. He wasn't looking at the tactical maps yet. He was looking at the cultural etiquette files for the outer rim systems where the Velvet Chain operated. He scrolled through a list of greetings for the reptilian Kargath species. Do not bare teeth. Do not extend an open hand. Half of diplomacy, Kaito muttered to the empty cockpit, is just not insulting someone's ancestors by blinking wrong. He engaged the drive. The stars outside stretched into lines of infinite light, and the skiff vanished into the slipstream, a needle seeking a haystack in a universe of haystacks. Back on the Vale station, Saren Voss was not sleeping. Her quarters were elegant, minimalist, and currently a crime scene. She stood over the body of a courier, a young avian male, his feathers matted with blood. He lay slumped against her desk, his eyes wide and glassy. He had died reaching for her. Saren knelt, her metal silk armor chiming softly. She didn't touch the body with her bare hands. She used a scanner from her wrist comp. Poison. Fast-acting. He had been dead before he hit the floor. Why come here? She whispered. She saw the clutched fist of the dead courier. Rigor had set in, but she could see the glint of metal. She pried the fingers open, using a small pry tool from her belt. In the dead palm lay a council code key. It was old, tarnished, the kind used for physical archives that hadn't been digitized. Saren picked it up. She recognized the encryption style. It belonged to the Meridian block, the same block that had applauded Hale earlier. She stood up, her mind racing. Hale's abduction wasn't just about slavery or profit, and it wasn't random. The Meridian block was pushing for a vote next week. A vote to restructure the Council's defense grid, giving them unprecedented oversight. If Earth's ambassador was seen defecting, it would create chaos. It would prove that new species were unstable. It would justify the Meridian power grab. They killed this courier to stop him from delivering this key, she realized. And he came to me because he knew I watch. She went to her window, looking out at the station's exterior. Somewhere out there, Mason Hale was gone. And if she was right, the entire Galactic Council was about to be held hostage by a lie. She closed her fist around the key. The cold metal bit into her palm. She needed to find Hale, not for Earth, but for the truth. The narrative fractured, splitting across the vast distances of space on a luxurious high-speed yacht moving through the dark lanes between stars. Mason Hale woke up. He was not in a cell. He was in a room that looked like a 5-star hotel suite, draped in velvet and silk. But when he rushed to the door, it didn't open. When he picked up a vase to smash the window didn't break. It absorbed the impact with a dull thud. He ran to the balcony when there was no airlock. A force field shimmered gold in the air. Beyond it, the stars were streaks of motion. He looked down and saw other balconies, other cages, row upon row of them, housing beautiful, terrified things. He gripped the railing, his knuckles white, and screamed into the silence of the void, billions of miles away. Saren Voss stood in the empty observation deck of the council chamber. The room was dark, the empty floating pods looking like tombstones in a graveyard. She looked down at the podium where Hale had stood only hours ago. She didn't see a podium. She saw a stage set for murder. She turned the code key over in her fingers. the metal clicking against her rings. Then, with a sudden sharp movement, she turned and walked into the shadows. The game had started, and she was done playing by the rules. Earth had sent a ninja, the Council had a spy, and somewhere in the dark. The velvet chain tightened its grip. The asteroid city of Kabr spun in the dark like a rotisserie chicken made of iron and regret. It was a border bazaar, a chaotic agglomeration of rusted hulls, pressurized habitat bubbles, and ancient mining rigs welded together by desperation and indifference. Neon signs in a dozen languages crawled over the corroded metal skins of the buildings, advertising cheap oxygen, cheaper memory wipes, and pleasures that were illegal in civilized space. Kaito Ryu stepped off the transport shuttle, the magnetic soles of his boots engaging with a dull thud against the docking bay floor. The air here tasted of recycled sulfur and fried spices. It was the smell of a place where people came to disappear. He adjusted the strap of the heavy containment case slung over his shoulder. To the casual observer, and even to the trained eyes of the Port Authority, he was a mid-level courier for the syndicate, a man who moved exotic goods with no questions asked. He wore a heavy synth leather duster that concealed the sleek matte black armor beneath, and his face was obscured by a low-brimmed cap and a rebreather mask. He walked toward the customs checkpoint. The scanner gate was a towering archway of peeling yellow paint and humming sensors. It was designed to strip a soul bare, reading DNA, retina patterns, and heart rate history. Kaito reached into his pocket and crushed a small capsule between his thumb and forefinger. A fine, shimmering powder coated his glove. This was biometric dust, a masterpiece of Black Ops forgery. As he wiped his hand across his brow, feigning a sweat wipe, the dust settled into his pores. It contained the genetic markers of a man named Joran Vex, a registered slaver with high-level clearance and a terrible reputation. He stepped through the gate. The scanner beam washed over him. A wall of red light. Identity confirmed. The automated voice droned, sounding bored. "Welcome back, Master Vex." Kaito did not smile. He simply nodded and walked into the crush of the bazaar. Every alley here sold a different kind of silence. In one, you could buy the silence of a witness. In another, the silence of a conscience. And in the dark heart of the city, at the Velvet Chains auction house, you could buy the eternal silence of a human life. His target was a towering structure that looked like a gilded tumor growing out of the asteroid's rock face. It was the Palace of Mirrors, a pleasure hotel that served as the front for the Velvet Chain's regional operations. Kaito moved through the crowd, his eyes tracking threats before they registered as movement. He was a ghost in a machine made of noise, high above the grime of the streets. Saren Voss sat in the cramped cockpit of a rented stealth pod clamped to the asteroid's exterior hull. The space was barely large enough for her tall, elegant frame. Her ceremonial metal silk armor was uncomfortably rigid in the tight quarters, but she did not remove it. On the screen before her, lines of data cascaded like green rain. She had inserted the code key she found on the dead courier into her portable decoder. She had expected to find a message, perhaps a coordinate. She found a ledger. It was a document of staggering corruption. It detailed bribes paid to sector governors, disappearances of inconvenient journalists, and most chillingly, votes in the Galactic Council that were marked as prepaid 3 years in advance. Saren felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. The Meridian Crown, the faction she had suspected, the faction she had feared, was not just a political group. It was a cancer that had already metastasized. They were buying the galaxy one vote at a time, and they were funding it with the proceeds from high-end slavery. She scrolled to the bottom of the ledger. A new entry blinked in urgent red. Asset transfer, diplomatic class. Destination, Palace of Mirrors, Caber. Status, transit to curator. Her eyes narrowed. Hail. They had brought him here. She killed the screen and grabbed her helmet. She did not have backup. She did not have a warrant. She had a wrist ring that turned into a blade, and she had a burning cold rage that felt terrifyingly like justice. The interior of the Palace of Mirrors was a labyrinth of sensory overload. The walls were lined with actual mirrors, thousands of them, angled to shatter reflections into infinite fragments. The floor was clear glass, revealing a tank of bioluminescent jellyfish swimming beneath the guests' feet. The air was thick with perfume that smelled of crushed orchids and pheromones. Kaito walked the corridors, his reflection walking with him in 1,000 directions. He had checked his weapon at the door, a necessary surrender to maintain his cover. But a ninja was never unarmed. His body was a weapon. The environment was an arsenal. He was heading for the restricted elevator at the back of the VIP lounge. According to the intel Vance had given him, the auction holding cells were in the sublevels, insulated by 10 feet of lead and rock. He turned a corner into a long, narrow hallway lined with floor-to-ceiling mirrors. It was empty. Too empty. Kaito stopped. The hairs on the back of his neck rose. The silence here was artificial. The hum of the ventilation had cut out. He saw the movement in the reflection of a reflection, a flash of silver and teal. He dropped. A beam of hard, searing light slashed through the air where his neck had been a microsecond before. The heat of it singed the collar of his duster. Kaito rolled forward, coming up in a crouch. Standing 10 feet away, blocking the path, was Saren Voss. She looked majestic and lethal. Her metal silk armor caught the light of the chandelier, rippling like liquid mercury. Her face was set in a mask of grim determination. On her right wrist, a thick silver band projected a curved blade of coherent photons, humming with a deadly high-pitched whine. "Assassin," she hissed. "You will not reach him." She thought he was there to kill Hale. Of course, to the council. A human Black Ops agent looked exactly like a cleaner sent to tie up loose ends. Kaito did not speak. He did not have time to explain, and she did not look in the mood to listen. She lunged. She was fast, much faster than the security guards on the station. She moved with the grace of a dancer and the intent of a viper. She slashed diagonally, a strike meant to cleave him from shoulder to hip. Kaito sidestepped, the blade missing him by an inch. The heat washed over his face. He didn't strike back. He flowed around her. He wasn't trying to win, he was trying to survive. "You are fast for a human," Saren said, pivoting on her heel and thrusting the blade toward his heart. "And you are loud for a spy," Kaito replied, his voice a low gravel. He caught her wrist, not the one with the blade, but her offhand as she tried to grapple him. He used her momentum against her, twisting his hips and throwing her toward the wall. She hit the mirrors with a crash that sounded like falling ice. Shards of glass rained down, multiplying their reflections into 1,000,000 jagged eyes. She recovered instantly, pushing off the wall and launching herself at him again. This time, she fainted high and swept low. Kaito jumped, planting a foot on the unblemished wall and backflipping over her head. He landed silently behind her. Before she could turn, he moved. He didn't strike her. He stepped into her guard. He wrapped one arm around her waist to pin her arms and brought his other hand up to her throat. He stopped. His gloved fingers hovered 2 millimeters from her windpipe. He could have crushed her larynx. He could have snapped her neck. They froze there, suspended in the shattered hallway. Kaito's chest was pressed against her back, his breath hot against her ear. Saren went rigid, her light blade humming dangerously close to her own leg. The silence stretched, heavy and intimate. Saren realized with a jolt of shock that he wasn't holding her captive. He was waiting for her to realize she was dead. "Drop the light," Kaito whispered. Saren swallowed. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. This wasn't the brutality of the slavers she knew. This was control. Absolute, terrifying control. She deactivated the ring. The blade vanished with a soft zip. Kaito released her instantly and stepped back 3 paces, his hands raised to show he held no weapon. Saren spun around, eyes blazing, her hand hovering over her wrist ring. "You're the ninja." Kaito adjusted his rebreather, though it had not moved. "And you are the liaison. We seem to be frequenting the same bad neighborhoods." Saren straightened her armor, trying to regain her composure. She felt rattled, a sensation she loathed. She had expected a thug, a soldier, a monster. She had not expected restraint. It threw her off balance more than the throw had. "I thought you were a cleaner," she said, her voice regaining its icy edge, sent to silence Hale before he could talk. "And I thought you were a diplomat," Kaito said. "You have a vicious right hook for a bureaucrat," Saren scoffed, brushing glass dust from her shoulder. "I am not a diplomat today. I am resolving an oversight." "By stabbing couriers?" Kaito asked, nodding toward his disguise. Saren looked him up and down. Her eyes lingered on the way he stood, relaxed but coiled, ready to explode into motion. "I see Earth's dramatic myth is not entirely propaganda," she said, masking her unease with sarcasm. "Though I expected you to be taller, and perhaps less fond of theatrics." Kaito glanced at her wrist, where the lethal ring sat innocuous and silver. "That is a nice toy," he said dryly. "Hard light projector. Illegal in 12 systems. 14, Saren corrected. And it is not a toy. It is a ceremonial letter opener. I just received very aggressive mail." Kaito snorted, a sound that might have been a laugh if he allowed it. He checked his wrist comp. "We are wasting time. Hale is not in the sub-levels." Saren frowned. "How do you know?" "Because while we were dancing, my scanner picked up a transfer signature. He was moved 10 minutes ago. Sold." "Sold?" Saren stepped closer, the hostility replaced by urgency. "To whom?" "The auction wasn't scheduled until tomorrow." "Private sale," Kaito said. He tapped the display on his gauntlet, projecting a small hologram between them. "Buyer is listed as a private patron. The payment originated from a shell account tied to the Meridian Crown." Saren's face paled. "The Meridian Crown. They have him." "Who are they?" Kaito asked. Saren looked at the floor, at the broken glass. "They are the rot in the council, a faction that believes order is more important than freedom. I have been gathering evidence against them for cycles, but every witness I find vanishes. Hale isn't just a hostage to them. He is a tool." She looked up at Kaito. "If they have him, they will take him to the curator." "The curator?" "A specialist," Saren said, her voice hollow. "He uses a persona loom. It is forbidden tech. It weaves neural patterns like fabric. It can edit memory, rewrite loyalty, change a man's soul until he thanks you for the chains." Kaito's eyes hardened. "We need to move. Now." Saren hesitated. "Why should I trust you?" "You are a shadow agent. Your mission is likely to retrieve the asset or destroy it to prevent leaks." "My mission is to bring him home," Kaito said. "Alive." Saren studied him. She read the micro-expressions around his eyes, the only part of him she could see. She saw focus. She saw a strange, quiet honor that didn't belong in this neon cesspool. "I have access codes for the secure transport tubes," she said. "And I know what the curator looks like. And I can get us past the guards without setting off alarms," Kaito countered. "A partnership of necessity," she said, though she didn't sound convinced. "A deal," Kaito corrected. "I use your face, you use my hands. We get Hale. Then we go our separate ways." "Agreed," Saren said. "But if you cross me, Ryu, I will not miss next time." Kaito turned toward the service exit. "If I cross you, Voss, you won't get a next time." Mason Hale sat in a chair that was too comfortable. It molded to his body, warm and soothing. The room was circular, bathed in soft amber light. There were no corners, no sharp edges. Standing before him was the curator. He was a slender, tall being of a species Hale did not recognize. His skin was translucent, showing the pulsing of blue veins beneath, and his voice sounded like it was coming from inside Hale's own head. "Do not struggle, Mason," the curator said gently. "Struggle creates knots in the weave." Hale tried to stand, but his limbs felt heavy, distant. "What do you want? Money? Earth will pay." "We do not want money." The curator smiled. "We want you. We want your voice. We want your face. We want the trust your people place in you." He gestured to the machine behind him. It was the persona loom. It looked less like a computer and more like a loom made of light and organic fiber. Shimmering threads of energy danced between golden spindles. "You are confused," the curator said. "You think you are a diplomat, but that is just a draft. A rough sketch. We are going to refine you. We are going to make you a symbol." "A symbol of what?" Hale whispered, tears leaking from his eyes. "Of the necessity of control," the curator said. "You will tell the galaxy that Earth is dangerous, that your people are plotting war. You will beg the council to intervene, and you will believe it, every word." The curator touched a control surface. The loom began to hum. The threads of light extended, drifting toward Hale's head like searching tendrils. "No." Hale sobbed. "Please. I am Mason Hale. I am a father. I am." "You are a canvas," the curator said soothingly. "And we are about to paint a masterpiece." Kaito and Saren moved through the maintenance shafts of the hotel. It was a tight squeeze. The tunnels were lined with power conduits that radiated heat, making the air stifling and metallic. They had to crawl. Kaito went first, moving with eerie silence on his hands and knees. Saren followed, her armor clicking softly against the grating. They paused at a junction to let a patrol of heavy combat drones pass in the corridor below. The grate beneath them offered a view of the chrome-plated killing machines. Kaito pressed himself against the wall of the shaft to give Saren room. It wasn't enough. In the cramped darkness, their bodies were forced into intimacy. Her leg brushed against his hip, her chest plate pressed against his shoulder. He could smell her, not the perfume of the hotel, but something cleaner, like ozone and cold rain. He could hear her breathing, a rhythmic hitch that told him she was terrified but controlling it perfectly. Saren looked at him. They were inches apart. The faint light from the grate below illuminated the sharp angles of his jaw, the dark intensity of his eyes. She found herself looking at the line of his throat, where the armor gave way to skin. She reached out, her fingers hovering over the emblem on his chest armor. It was blank, no flag, no rank. "You have no allegiance," she whispered, the sound barely audible over the drone of the fans. "Just a mission. I have allegiance to the people who can't fight for themselves." Kaito murmured back. His eyes met hers. They were dark, bottomless. Saren pulled her hand back as if the curiosity had burned her, a near touch that felt more electric than the weapon on her wrist. The Meridian Crown believes they are saving the galaxy, Saren said, needing to fill the silence, to push back the sudden tension. They believe that chaos is the enemy, that freedom is just a chaotic variable that needs to be solved. And you? Kaito asked. I believe that power never apologizes, she said bitterly. It just rewrites history so it doesn't have to. That is why I need the ledger. To force the apology. Kaito shifted, checking the path ahead. Power never apologizes, he agreed, but people can. If someone makes them face what they have done. And you are that someone? Saren asked. The one who makes them face it. I am just the delivery system, Kaito said. He turned back to the tunnel, but the moment lingered, a shared breath in the dark, a recognition of two lonely creatures who walked the edges of the map. We are close, Kaito said, breaking the spell. The gravity generators for this sector are unstable. The schematics show a transfer corridor ahead that utilizes variable gravity for cargo loading. It flips every 10 seconds to assist with heavy lifting. Fun, Saren muttered. They kicked out the grate and dropped into the corridor. It was a wide, industrial hall. At the far end, a heavy blast door was sealed shut. The floor shuddered. Gravity shift in 3, 2, 1. A computerized voice announced. Suddenly, up was down. Kaito and Saren were slammed into the ceiling, which was now the floor. Saren gasped as the impact rattled her teeth. Kaito landed in a crouch, absorbing the force. We have company, Saren shouted. From the door at the far end, a squad of velvet chain guards poured in. They were wearing magnetic boots. They ran along the walls, firing plasma rifles. Move, Kaito yelled. They ran. It was a nightmare of physics. Every 10 seconds, the world flipped. Gravity shift. The voice droned. Kaito leaped as the gravity reversed. He soared through the air, passing a guard who was falling the other way. Kaito twisted in midair, kicking the guard in the helmet, sending him spinning into the far wall. Saren was adapting. She used the shifts. As gravity flipped, she activated her light blade and let herself fall toward a cluster of enemies, turning her descent into a lethal strike. She landed among them, a whirlwind of silver and light, cutting through their armor like paper. Kaito saw a control console near the blast door. I need to override the lock. Cover me. I am a little busy, Saren shouted, parrying a plasma bolt with her blade. Kaito sprinted. The gravity flipped again. He was running on the wall now. He slid behind a crate as shots chewed up the metal around him. He reached the console and jacked his gauntlet into the port. His HUD scrolled numbers. Decrypting. Behind him. Saren was cornered. 3 guards had her pinned down with suppressive fire. Kaito didn't look back. He trusted her. He had to. Got it, he yelled. The blast door hissed open. Kaito grabbed a spherical device from his belt, a gravity grenade, and tossed it into the center of the guards. Jump, he commanded. Saren didn't hesitate. She leaped toward the door. Kaito grabbed her hand, pulling her through the threshold just as the grenade detonated. It created a localized singularity, sucking the guards and the debris into a crushing point of infinite density for a split second before exploding outward. They tumbled into the next room, collapsing on the floor. Silence returned. Saren sat up, breathing hard, her hair escaping its severe bun. That was effective. Kaito stood, offering her a hand. We are not done. Look. They were in a records room. Rows of crystal data shards lined the walls. In the center was a master terminal. Kaito accessed it. We need the manifest. We need to know exactly where they took him. He pulled the crystal. He slotted it into his reader and projected the data. There was Hale's picture, but the text below it didn't say hostage. It didn't say slave. Saren gasped. The text read, Subject, Mason Hale. Classification, Keystone Asset. Assignment, Council Reframe Operation. It's not just a vote, Saren whispered, horror dawning on her face. A reframe operation. They aren't just going to make him lie, they are going to use him to rewrite the entire history of the conflict. They are going to use him to start a war that they have already won. Kaito pulled the crystal, shoving it into his pouch. Then we have to break the frame. He looked at Saren. The distrust was gone, replaced by the grim solidarity of soldiers in a trench. Lead the way to the curator, Kaito said. Saren ignited her blade, the blue light casting long, sharp shadows across her face. With pleasure. The vessel was called the Mask of Silence, a carnival ship the size of a small moon, drifting through the dark sector like a jeweled tumor. From the outside, it was a riot of flashing strobes, holographic fireworks, and neon streamers that trailed behind it for miles. It promised joy. It promised excess. But as Kaito's stolen shuttle docked in the lower bay, the first thing he noticed was the sound. There was none. The crowds that moved through the cavernous docking ring were silent. Thousands of beings, multi-limbed, scaled, feathered, and skinned in chrome, shuffled in a synchronized hush. They wore masks of porcelain and gold. The air smelled of spun sugar and ozone, but beneath it lay the copper tang of fear. The screams here did not travel. They were swallowed by dampening fields and acoustic foam. Kaito Ryu stood in front of a mirror in the shuttle's cramped changing room, looking at himself with deep disdain. "This is ridiculous," Kaito said. He pulled at the collar of the suit Saren had acquired for him. It was a formal tunic of the Valen aristocracy, high-necked, made of stiff purple velvet, and embroidered with actual crushed gemstones. It restricted his arm movement by 15%. "It is high fashion," Saren said from the doorway. She was leaning against the frame, a smirk playing on her lips. "And you look dashing, like a very dangerous grape." Kaito glared at her via the reflection. "I look like a target. I cannot reach my knives in this." "If you are reaching for your knives, we have already failed," Saren countered. She pushed off the doorframe and walked toward him. She was breathtaking. She wore a gown of shifting nebulous silk that seemed to hold a star field within the fabric. Her face was hidden behind a delicate silver half-mask, but her eyes, those teal, luminous eyes, burned with a focus that cut through the glamour. "This gala is hosted by Archduke Valen," she explained, adjusting Kaito's collar with quick, efficient fingers. "He campaigns publicly against the slave trade. He gives speeches about the dignity of sentient life. And down in his cargo hold, he keeps 1,000 collars ready for shipment. He is a hypocrite of the highest order, which means he loves flattery." She stepped back, examining her handiwork. "Now, pay attention. In Valen Court, gestures matter. If a guest offers you a blue drink, you accept it with your left hand. If they offer red, you decline. And if someone taps their fan against their chin twice, do not nod." "Why?" Kaito asked, trying to adjust the hidden holster at the small of his back. "Because tapping the chin twice is a proposition for a duel to the death," Saren said smoothly. "And while I know you would win, it would ruin the carpet." Kaito stopped fidgeting. He looked at her. "You seem to enjoy this part." "The lying." Saren's smile didn't reach her eyes. "The lying is the only part of this job that is honest. Ryu, it is the truth that gets you killed." They moved into the gala. The ballroom was a hollowed-out sphere in the center of the ship, lined with balconies that overlooked a dance floor of suspended gravity plates. Dancers floated and spun in the air, trailing ribbons of light. The music was a low, thrumming vibration that you felt in your teeth rather than heard. Saren released Kaito's arm. Blend, she whispered. I will draw the eyes. You find the cracks. She glided into the room, and the effect was immediate. Heads turned, sensors reoriented. She was a beacon of cold, regal beauty, laughing at jokes she couldn't hear, touching the arms of monsters who thought they owned the stars. She radiated a charm that was weaponized, pulling the security detail's attention toward the center of the room. Kaito vanished. He didn't turn invisible. He simply became uninteresting. He adopted the posture of a bored servant, his shoulders slumped, his eyes downcast. He moved to the edge of the room, near the heavy velvet drapes that covered the service alcoves. He slipped behind a curtain. The moment he was out of sight, the slump vanished. He vaulted up a maintenance ladder, moving with the silence of a shadow, the stiff purple velvet groaning but holding. He crawled through the ventilation shafts, bypassing the biometric scanners with the frequency jammer Vance had provided. He wasn't looking for a cell. High-value assets like Hale weren't kept in cages, they were kept in display cases. He found it in the center of the ship's botanical ring. It was a glass garden. The walls were transparent aluminum, looking out into the star-streaked void. The plants inside were bioluminescent, glowing with soft pulses of blue and amber. The air here was pumped with a mild narcotic mist, smelling sickly sweet, designed to keep the inhabitants calm, pliable, and dreamy. Mason Hale sat on a stone bench beneath a weeping willow that dripped leaves of pure light. He was wearing clean, white robes. He looked peaceful. Kaito dropped from the ceiling, landing in a crouch behind a hedge of crystal ferns. He tapped his comms. I have him, Kaito whispered. Botanical ring, Sector 4. I am on my way. Saren's voice came back, tight and breathless. I just finished explaining to a reptile that I do not want to see his egg collection. Kaito moved through the garden. The plants brushed against his armor, chiming like bells. He reached Hale. Ambassador, Kaito said softly. Hale looked up. His movement was too smooth. His eyes tracked Kaito's face with a mechanical fluidity that made the skin on Kaito's neck crawl. Hello, Hale said. His voice was flat, the cadence stripped of its human messiness. Are you here for the viewing? The light is very good today. Hale, listen to me. I am Kaito Ryu. I am here to take you home. Earth sent me. Earth, Hale repeated. The word seemed to confuse him. Earth is aggressive, disorderly. The Meridian Crown offers structure. Structure is peace. Kaito grabbed Hale's shoulders. The diplomat didn't flinch. He felt like a doll made of meat and bone. Kaito checked Hale's pupils. They were dilated, unresponsive to the change in light. He saw the faint spiderweb scarring behind the ears, the telltale injection sites of neural needles. Saren dropped into the garden a moment later, her gown fluttering around her. She had discarded her mask. Is he hurt? She asked, rushing forward. He is wrong, Kaito said, stepping back to let her see. Saren looked at Hale. She looked at the blank smile, the empty serenity in his gaze. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and brushed the hair away from his temple. She saw the scars. She froze. The color drained from her face, leaving her as pale as the moon-glass walls. Her breath hitched in a sound that was half gasp, half sob. Saren? Kaito asked, his voice sharp. I know these marks, she whispered. Her hand went to her own head, her fingers tracing an invisible line along her hairline, the persona loom. They didn't just interrogate him, they opened him up. They reorganized him. She was shaking now, a violent tremor that rattled the armor beneath her silk. She wasn't seeing Hale. She was seeing something else, a memory she had buried under layers of sarcasm and competence. They take the parts of you that say no and they cut them out, she said, her voice rising in panic. They make you watch while they do it. I can't be here. I can't see this. She started to back away, her eyes wide and unseeing. For the first time, the spy was gone. The warrior was gone. There was only a terrified survivor standing in the wreckage of a trigger she hadn't seen coming. Kaito stepped into her space. He didn't grab her. He didn't shake her. He reached out and wrapped his hand around her wrist, his fingers firm against her pulse point. "Voss," he said. She stared at him, her chest heaving. "Look at me," Kaito commanded. "Not at him. At me." She focused on his eyes. They were dark, steady, an anchor in the storm. "You are here," Kaito said. "You are Saren Voss. You are the one who stabs couriers and insults nobility. You are not on that table. You are standing in a garden, and I need you." He squeezed her wrist, a grounding pressure. It was gentle, chosen. "Come back to me," he said. Saren took a ragged breath. She held his gaze for a long second, drawing strength from his absolute certainty. Slowly, the terror receded, replaced by a cold, sharp rage. She nodded. "I am here." "Good," Kaito said, releasing her. "We are leaving." The garden lights turned red. A klaxon blared, shattering the serene silence. Heavy shutters slammed down over the glass walls, sealing them in. A voice boomed over the intercom. It was the voice of Archduke Valen, dripping with false hospitality. "My esteemed guests, it appears we have unauthorized visitors in the garden. How delightful. I do love a live performance." A holographic projection flickered to life in the center of the garden. It showed the ballroom, where the Archduke stood on a floating platform. Beside him stood a woman in a pristine white military uniform. Saren gasped. "Commander Tallis." "Please welcome our guest of honor," the Archduke crowed. "Commander Tallis of Council Security. She has been hunting a very dangerous mole within our ranks. And it seems the mole has walked right into our trap." Tallis stepped forward. Her face was stern, the face of a woman Saren had once looked up to as a mentor. "Saren Voss," Tallis said, her voice amplified. "You are under arrest for treason against the Council and conspiracy with the terrorist entity known as Earth. Surrender, and your death will be painless." Saren stared at the hologram. The betrayal hit her harder than the light blade could have. Tallis wasn't just a bystander, she was Meridian Crown. She was the one protecting the ledger. "I wasn't the hunter," Saren whispered, a bitter taste in her mouth. "I was the bait. They let me find the key. They let me find the ledger. They wanted me to lead them to the Earth agent." "We have to move," Kaito said. He hoisted Hale over his shoulder. The Diplomat was dead weight, smiling vacantly at the red warning lights. The garden doors hissed open, but it wasn't a rescue team. It was a squad of elites, wearing mirrored masks and carrying suppression staves. "Go!" Kaito yelled. He took off running toward the service exit, carrying Hale as if he weighed nothing. Saren drew her wrist blade. The blue lights snapped into existence, humming with lethal intent. She didn't run. She stood her ground for 2 seconds, parrying the first strike from a guard. The staff sparked against her blade. She riposted, a fluid slash that severed the guard's weapon and sent him sprawling. Then she turned and sprinted after Kaito. They burst into a corridor that was a nightmare of shifting holograms. The walls dissolved into images of roaring fire, then jagged ice, then swarms of insects. It was designed to disorient, to make the runner stumble. Kaito didn't stumble. He closed his eyes, trusting his other senses, running on instinct and the echo of Saren's footsteps behind him. Saren was fighting a running battle. She spun and slashed, deflecting plasma bolts that hissed through the illusionary fire. She was a whirlwind, her gown tattered, her armor scorched, fighting with a ferocity that bordered on desperation. They reached the intersection leading to the shuttle bay. Kaito. "Look out!" Saren screamed. Kaito opened his eyes just as Hale moved. The Diplomat, who had been limp and compliant, suddenly stiffened. His eyes flashed with a digital overlay. "Beacon active," Hale said in a mechanical monotone. "Target designated." Hale reached into his robe and pulled out a small, flat disc. He slapped it onto Kaito's chest plate. It was a gravity anchor. Kaito was slammed into the floor as the device increased his weight by 500%. The floor plates buckled. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't move. A strike team dropped from the ceiling hatches, landing in a circle around him. They weren't using stunners. They were using kinetic rifles. "Fire!" the leader shouted. Kaito roared, forcing his arm up, trying to rip the anchor off. A bolt caught him in the shoulder, burning through the armor, searing flesh. Another hit his thigh. Saren hit the squad like a meteor. She didn't finesse them, she brutalized them. She severed the anchor on Kaito's chest with a precise slash of her light blade, then threw a flashbang grenade she had lifted from the first guard. The corridor exploded in white light. "Get up!" Saren screamed, grabbing Kaito's good arm. Kaito stumbled to his feet, blood streaming down his left arm. He grabbed Hale, who was standing still, waiting for new orders. Kaito didn't be gentle this time. He grabbed the Diplomat by the collar and dragged him. The shuttle bay was cut off. Blast doors were closing. The pods. Kaito grunted, pointing to a row of emergency maintenance ejectors along the wall. They weren't escape pods. They were coffins used for jettisoning trash or repairing external hull plates. They were tiny, airless, and cold. Saren shoved Hale into the first one and slapped the launch button. "He is gone!" she yelled. She grabbed Kaito and threw him into the second pod, diving in after him. It was built for one person. They were crushed together, limbs tangled. Saren hit the seal. The door slammed shut just as the corridor filled with laser fire. "Launch!" she screamed at the console. Explosive bolts fired. The pod was kicked away from the ship with violent force. Silence returned. Absolute, crushing silence. The pod was spinning. Through the small viewport, the carnival ship was a receding blur of light. Around them, the debris field of a broken moon glittered like a sea of diamonds. Inside, the only light came from the console and Saren's glowing eyes. The air scrubbers hissed, struggling to keep up. Kaito groaned, his head lolling back. The plasma burn on his shoulder was deep, smelling of cooked meat and cauterized synthetic fiber. "Stay with me," Saren said. Her voice was shaking. She ripped a strip of fabric from her ruined gown and pressed it against the wound. Kaito hissed through his teeth, his hand gripping her arm reflexively. "I am sorry," Saren stammered, tears welling in her eyes. "I am so sorry. I led you into a trap. I trusted Talus. I thought I was the player, but I was just the piece. I was so stupid." She pressed harder on the wound, her hands slick with his blood. "You are going to die because I was arrogant." Kaito looked at her. The pain was blinding, but his mind was clear. He saw the guilt eating her alive. He saw the woman who had spent her life building walls, only to have them crushed by the people she served. He reached up with his good hand. He touched her cheek, smearing a streak of red across her pale skin. "Hey," he whispered. Saren looked down at him, a tear spilling over and tracking through the blood. "You didn't know," Kaito said. "I should have known," she cried. "That is my job, to know. Your job is to survive," Kaito said. "And you did. We are alive." He coughed, wincing. "Listen to me. You trusted the wrong people. That happens. It is not a sin to be betrayed. The sin is staying betrayed. Saren choked on a sob. I don't know who to trust anymore. The council is rotten. Talus is a traitor. The universe is just a trap waiting to spring. Kaito's thumb brushed away the tear. Then trust the right one now, he said softly. The words hung in the tiny, airless space. It wasn't a declaration of love, it was something heavier. It was an offer of alliance in a world that allowed none. It was a promise that he would be the wall she could lean on. Saren stared at him. The distance between them was nothing. She could feel his heart beating against her chest. She leaned down, resting her forehead against his, closing her eyes. Okay, she whispered. I trust you. They drifted in the silence for a long time, the pod tumbling through the ice shards. The cold began to seep in. You know, Saren said quietly, her voice muffled against his shoulder. I always thought my value was in my utility. If I was useful to the High Council, I was safe. If I was useful to Talus, I had a place. She looked at the small viewport where the stars spun in dizzying arcs. But utility is just a leash, she said. Kaito watched the ice glitter outside, looking like shattered moons. Usefulness is what they can take from you, he said. Worth is what you keep when they have taken everything else. Saren looked back at him. What do we have left to keep, Ryu? Kaito looked at his blood on her hands. We have the truth, and we have the anger. That is enough fuel to burn them down. A chime sounded from the console. Incoming transmission. The computer announced, wideband frequency, Galactic newsfeed. Saren tapped the screen. A holographic news anchor appeared, looking grave. Breaking news from the Vale sector. A terrorist attack on the peaceful gala of Archduke Valen has resulted in chaos. Sources confirm that the rogue council liaison, Saren Voss, has defected. She is accused of conspiring with Earth extremists to assassinate key political figures. The image changed to a grainy, edited clip of Saren fighting the guards, making it look like she was slaughtering innocents. Furthermore, the anchor continued. The Earth agent known as the Ninja has been identified as a chaotic element. The Meridian Crown has issued a bounty. Both are considered armed and highly unstable. Saren watched the feed, her face hardening into stone. They took my name, she said. They took my rank. They took my life. Kaito struggled to sit up. He looked at the screen, then at her. Let them have the name, he said. We will build a new one. And Hale? She asked. Kaito checked the tracking monitor. Hale's pod was drifting 3 kilometers away, secure but silent. He is out, Kaito said. But he is broken. We have an unstable diplomat, a stolen ship, and the entire galaxy hunting us. Saren let out a short, sharp laugh. It sounded dangerous. Sounds like a fair fight, she said. She engaged the thrusters. The pod flared to life, moving to intercept Hale's coffin, turning its back on the carnival lights and heading deeper into the dark. The safe house was a ghost suspended in the vacuum, a derelict temple station drifting in the Lagrange point of a dead star. It was a relic of the pre-council era, a structure of obsidian stone and religious geometry that had been retrofitted by smugglers and spies. Thick, modern power cables snaked over ancient bas-relief carvings of multi-armed gods. And the air filtration system was so old that the dust in the air glowed with a faint, bioluminescent pulse every time someone exhaled. It was like breathing inside a dying lung. Kaito Ryu sat on a crate of ammunition, watching Mason Hale. The diplomat was sitting on a prayer mat, staring at a statue of a faceless deity with a look of polite interest that was entirely vacant. Hale, Kaito said softly. The ambassador turned his head, The movement was too smooth, lacking the micro-hesitations of natural motor control. "Yes, Kaito? Tell me about your house in Virginia," Kaito said. Hale smiled. It was a perfect smile. "It is a colonial revival. White siding, black shutters. There is an oak tree in the front yard that blocks the gutter. My wife, Elena, hates it. She wants to cut it down, but I tell her the shade is worth the maintenance." Kaito nodded slowly. He kept his voice even, devoid of accusation. "And your daughter? What is her name?" "Sophie," Hale answered instantly. "She is 7. She loves ballet and dinosaurs." Kaito leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Hale, you do not have a daughter. You have a son. His name is Mark. He is 12. Hale did not blink. He did not look confused. He simply adjusted his smile, a glitch correcting itself in real time. "Of course," Hale said, his tone bright and undisturbed. "Mark, he is 12. He loves ballet and dinosaurs." Kaito sat back, a cold heaviness settling in his chest. It was not amnesia. Amnesia was a void. This was an overwrite. The persona loom had not just erased the truth, it had paved over it with a narrative that was flexible, eager to please, and terrifyingly shallow. Hale was no longer a person. He was a biological interface for a script. Saren Voss stood in the shadows of the archway, her arms crossed over her scorched chest plate. She had been watching the interrogation for an hour, and with every wrong answer Hale gave, she seemed to shrink inside her armor. "He is not in there," Saren said, her voice hollow. "He is," Kaito said, standing up and walking over to Hale. He placed a hand on the man's shoulder. "The subconscious fights back. That is why he mixes the details. Mark does not like ballet. Sophie is the neighbor's kid. His mind is grabbing at nearby data to fill the holes." Kaito looked at Saren. "We need to know what the script is. If we know what they want him to say, we know what the Meridian Crown is planning." Kaito turned back to Hale. He changed his tactic. He stopped asking about the past and asked about the future. "Hale, why did you defect?" The reaction was immediate. Hale's posture straightened, his eyes locked onto a point in the middle distance, as if reading a teleprompter. "I defected to save the peace," Hale recited. His voice dropped an octave, becoming grave, authoritative. "Earth is not ready for the Council. The Sol system is a breeding ground for chaos. My government has authorized a series of covert assassinations to destabilize the Meridian bloc. I could not be a party to murder. I demand the Council invoke Article 55, Emergency Containment." Saren inhaled sharply. The glowing dust swirled around her face. "Article 55, she whispered. "Martial law." Kaito looked at her. "Explain." "It is a War Powers Act," Saren said, stepping into the light. "It suspends the Senate. It gives the Council security forces controlled by the Meridian Crown absolute authority to blockade and occupy any system deemed a threat." She looked at Hale with horror. "They do not want a treaty. They want a war. But they need Earth to fire the first shot. Or at least, they need the galaxy to believe Earth did." Kaito nodded grimly. "And Hale is the trigger. A confession from the ambassador himself. It justifies everything. The crackdowns, the arrests, the fleet maneuvers. They will blockade Earth for its own protection and never leave." Saren turned away, walking toward the edge of the platform where the temple walls gave way to a massive viewing port. Outside, a nebula drifted like spilled ink, bruised with purple and gold. "I have gaps," she said suddenly. Kaito let Hale return to his silent contemplation of the statue and walked over to her. He didn't speak. He waited. Saren traced a finger along the cold glass. My childhood. I have memories of an academy on the Prime World. I remember the lessons. I remember the exams. But I do not remember playing. I do not remember falling down and scraping my knee. I do not remember my mother's voice, only her title. She turned to him, her teal eyes wide and vulnerable. The Meridian Crown uses the loom to make witnesses loyal. They use it to make diplomats compliant. I was the perfect liaison. Kaito, I was efficient. I was unattached. I was clean. She looked at her hands, trembling slightly. What if I was not recruited? What if I was made? What if the reason I recognize the loom's signature is because I have sat in that chair? Kaito looked at her. He saw the cracks in the porcelain mask she had worn since the moment they met. She was terrifyingly competent, lethal, and arrogant, and beneath it all, she was a frightened child wondering if she was real. He did not offer a platitude. He did not tell her she was crazy. He walked over to a small, battered survival stove set up on a crate. "Sit down," Kaito said. Saren blinked, confused by the shift. "What?" "Sit. I am making tea." He busied himself with the ancient water purifier. It groaned and sputtered, dispensing a trickle of liquid into a metal cup. He dropped a tea bag, actual tea leaves from Earth, wrapped in silk, into the water. He swirled it around and handed it to her. Saren took the cup. She looked at the dark liquid, then at him. "We are discussing the existential horror of my identity. And you are brewing beverages. Drink," Kaito ordered gently. She took a sip. Her face contorted immediately. She coughed, lowering the cup. "That," she wheezed, "tastes like metal flowers soaked in engine coolant." "It is Earl Grey," Kaito said defensively. Taking a sip himself, he grimaced. "Okay, it is mostly engine coolant. The filter must be busted." Saren looked at his offended expression. The ninja, the deadliest weapon in the Sol arsenal, defeated by a water filter. A giggle escaped her. It was a strange sound, rusty and unpracticed. Then, it happened again. She started to laugh. It wasn't the polite, courtly laughter she used at galas. It was a deep, belly-shaking laugh that doubled her over. Kaito watched her, a faint smile touching the corner of his mouth. He set the terrible tea aside. Saren laughed until there were tears in her eyes, releasing the tension of the last 48 hours in a jagged torrent. Finally, she gasped, wiping her face. "That is awful," she said, breathless. "You should be court-martialed for that tea." "It is an acquired taste," Kaito said. Saren leaned back against the stone pillar, the laughter fading into a comfortable silence. She looked at him, and for the first time, her gaze wasn't scanning for threats. "You are real," she said softly. "Even if I am not. You are. You make terrible tea and you have terrible posture when you think no one is watching." Kaito sat down beside her. They were shoulder to shoulder, looking out at the nebula. The vastness of space felt less oppressive with another warm body nearby. "You are real, Voss," Kaito said. "A machine does not laugh at bad tea. A programmed mind does not question its own programming. The loom can edit memory, but it cannot fake the kind of pain you are feeling right now. That fear, that is proof of life." Saren looked down at her hands. Then she made a decision. She reached up and unclasped the high collar of her armor, exposing the pale skin of her neck. "My name," she said quietly, "is not just Saren. In the high tongue of my people, names have a prefix that denotes lineage. The council erased it when I joined. They said it was too tribal." She turned to him. "It is Vala Saren. It means Saren of the Tides." Kaito looked at her. It was a small offering, But in a life of secrets, it was a massive surrender. She was giving him the key to her history. Vala Saren, he repeated, testing the weight of the syllables. It suits you. You are relentless. He reached up to his own face. For the entire mission. For his entire career. He wore a subtle biometric veil, a holographic dampener that blurred the specific geometry of his cheekbones and eyes to cameras and casual observers. It made him forgettable. He tapped his temple, deactivating the veil. The air around his face shimmered and settled. The blur vanished. He revealed a scar that cut through his left eyebrow, a slight asymmetry in his jaw, and a mole on his right cheek. He looked sharper, older, and distinctly human. I do not have a poetic name, he said. But this is the face my mother kissed before I left. No scanners have seen it in 10 years. Saren looked at him. She studied the scar, the mole, the weary lines around his eyes. She reached out, her hand hovering in the space between them. Kaito did not pull away. He watched her hand, waiting. Slowly, deliberately. She closed the distance. Her fingers brushed his knuckles. His skin was rough, calloused from weapons training. Hers was cool and smooth. She laced her fingers through his. They sat there, holding hands on the edge of a derelict temple, while the universe drifted by in silence. The nebula churned, indifferent to their existence, but in that square foot of space, the indifference didn't matter. We could disappear, Saren whispered, her thumb tracing the back of his hand. We have a ship. We have a head start. We could go to the rim. They would never find us. Kaito looked at their joined hands. He squeezed her fingers. Tight. I want that, he admitted, his voice rough. I want to take you somewhere where the sky is blue and the tea actually tastes like leaves. He turned to face her. His eyes were intense, dark and burning. But we cannot. If we run, Hale speaks. If Hale speaks, the blockade begins. Earth burns. And the Meridian Crown wins. Saren closed her eyes, resting her forehead against his shoulder. I know. I wanted to say it. We can want this, Kaito said, his voice low and fierce. We can wait. We do not use each other to forget what is at stake. We finish the job. We break the machine. And then... Then? Saren asked, looking up. Then I take you to a tea shop I know in Kyoto, Kaito promised, and I buy you a cup that does not taste like poison. Saren managed a weak smile. It is a date. Ryu? Kaito stood up, pulling her with him. The moment of stillness was over. The mission clock was ticking. He walked back to the console where he had been analyzing the data they stole from the Carnival ship. He pulled up the footage of Hale's defection, the video that had started the crisis. He overlaid it with the scan of Hale they had just taken. Look at the timestamp, Kaito said, pointing to the scrolling numbers. The metadata on the broadcast says it was filmed 2 days ago, but look at the background radiation signature in the video. Saren leaned in, her analytical mind snapping back into focus. She squinted at the waveform. That is, Cherenkov radiation, distinctive blue shift. That kind of radiation only exists in one place in this sector, Kaito said, inside the containment field of a super reactor. Saren's eyes went wide. The council ring, the main power core for the Senate station. Kaito nodded. Hale's defection video wasn't filmed on a slaver ship. It wasn't filmed in a studio. It was filmed inside the council's own diplomatic compound. The velvet chain does not just have a base, Saren realized, her voice dropping to a whisper. They have a facility inside the capital, protected by diplomatic immunity, protected by the very laws I swore to uphold. That is why they could move him so fast, Kaito said. They brought him right back to the heart of the beast. That is where the persona loom is. That is where the broadcast will happen. We have to go back, Saren said. To the most heavily guarded station in the galaxy, with a hostage we are supposed to have kidnapped. We cannot sneak in, Kaito said. The sensors will pick up Hale's biosignatures. They will pick up my ship. Then how? Kaito looked at her. He looked at the armor she wore, the regal bearing she couldn't quite shake. We do not sneak, he said. We walk in the front door. Saren frowned. As what? As a Meridian Crown loyalist returning a captured fugitive. Kaito said, You are Saren Voss. You were the bait, remember? You tell them you captured the Earth terrorist. You are bringing him in to be processed. Saren stared at him. You want me to pretend to be one of them? To pretend I captured you? Kaito reached into his pack and pulled out a heavy magnetic suppression collar. He held it out to her. You have to sell it, Vala Saren. You have to walk me in on a leash. Saren looked at the collar. It was ugly, brutal, a symbol of everything she was fighting against. I cannot put that on you, she said. You have to, Kaito said firmly. He pressed it into her hands. It is just metal. It does not change who I am. And it does not change who you are. The plan was madness. It relied on the arrogance of the enemy. It relied on the belief that Saren Voss was, at her core, a creature of survival who would turn on her ally to save her own skin. They approached the council station in the stolen shuttle, squawking a Meridian emergency code. Inside the cockpit, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Hale was sedated in the back, locked in a stasis pod disguised as a cargo crate. Kaito knelt on the floor. He was stripped of his armor, wearing only ragged flight undersuits. He had bruised his own face to sell the struggle. Saren stood over him. She held the collar. Her hands were shaking. Do it, Kaito said. Saren took a breath. She locked the heavy metal ring around his neck. It clicked shut with a sound of finality. She attached the magnetic lead. I hate this, she whispered. Good, Kaito said, looking up at her from his knees. Use that hate. Make them believe it. The shuttle docked. The airlock hissed open. They were met by a phalanx of council guards and a high-ranking official, Sub-Minister Krell, a man who had taught Saren xenolinguistics at the academy. He was an old, kindly-looking man who was now revealed as one of the architects of the conspiracy. Liaison Voss, Krell said, his eyes scanning the scene. We heard reports you had defected. We were preparing a kill order. Saren stepped out of the shuttle. She yanked the chain. Kaito stumbled forward, falling to the deck plates at Krell's feet. He stayed down, playing the broken soldier. Defected? Saren said, her voice dripping with cold disdain. I was deep cover. Minister, I had to let the Earth filth believe I was turned so I could get close enough to neutralize him. She kicked Kaito in the ribs, not hard enough to break bone, but hard enough to look real. Kaito grunted, curling in on himself. He is faster than he looks, Saren said, smoothing her hair, but he is not smarter. Krell looked at Kaito, then at Saren. He smiled. It was a proud, paternal smile that made Saren's skin crawl. I told the Directorate you were too valuable to lose, Krell said. You have the killer instinct. Saren, you always did. He gestured to the guards. Take the prisoner to the loom facility. Prepare the Diplomat for the broadcast. We go live in 1 hour. Saren walked beside Krell as they moved through the pristine, white corridors of the station. She felt sick. Every word she spoke was a lie, but it was a lie that fit too easily in her mouth. She was charming. She was obsequious. She flattered Krell's foresight while dragging a man she loved by a chain. The performance blurred the lines. She felt the seductive pull of power. How easy it would be to actually be this person, to be safe, to be on the winning side. They reached the checkpoint for the inner sanctum. Krell paused. "You have done well, my dear. But tell me, did you hesitate when you put the collar on him?" Saren looked at Kaito. He was on his knees, head bowed. He looked defeated, but she saw his hand, resting on the floor, tapping a rhythmic code against the tile. "I am here. Hold fast." "I did not hesitate," Saren said, looking Krell in the eye. "Survival is not a choice, Minister. It is a reflex." Krell laughed softly. "That is why you are one of us." He keyed the door. The massive blast doors of the hidden facility groaned open. Inside, it was a sterile paradise, white floors, soft lights, and the hum of terrible machinery. Saren felt a wave of self-loathing crash over her. She was manipulating a man she once respected. She was using the tools of the oppressor. She felt a mental touch, not telepathy, but the memory of Kaito's voice from the temple. Usefulness isn't the same as worth. She wasn't doing this to be useful. She was doing this to destroy them. Kaito looked up at her as they crossed the threshold. His eyes were hard, clear. "Your survival skills aren't sins," his gaze seemed to say. "They are weapons. Aim them." The doors sealed behind them with a pressurized thud. High above on a monitor, a countdown clock began to tick. Broadcast window, 59 minutes. They were inside. The trap had closed. And now, they had to blow it apart from the belly of the beast. The interior of the hidden facility was not the dungeon Kaito had expected. It was a cathedral of aggressive serenity. The floors were polished white marble that seemed to glow from within, and the walls were adorned with floating sculptures of abstract light that shifted colors in time with a soothing, subsonic rhythm. The air smelled of ozone and synthetic jasmine. It was a place designed to make the obliteration of the self feel like a spiritual ascension. Sub-Minister Krell placed a hand on Saren's shoulder. His grip was fatherly, warm, and utterly repulsing. "You have returned to the fold at a critical moment." "Saren," Krell said, guiding her away from the security checkpoint where guards were dragging Kaito toward the service elevators. "The galaxy is tired of chaos. Tonight, we give them order." Saren forced a smile. It felt like wearing a mask made of glass. "It is an honor to serve, Minister." She watched Kaito disappear behind the heavy blast doors. He did not look back. He walked with the heavy, shuffling gait of a broken man, his head bowed. But Saren knew the truth. She knew that the moment those doors closed, the shuffle would vanish. She knew that Kaito Ryu was not a prisoner. He was a virus they had just voluntarily injected into their own operating system. "Come," Krell said, gesturing toward the main atrium where elegant alien dignitaries sipped iridescent nectar from crystal flutes. "We must socialize. The architects of the new peace are eager to meet the woman who captured the Earth terrorist." Saren walked into the room. It was a social layer built on top of a graveyard. She recognized faces she had seen on news feeds: philanthropists, sector governors, high-ranking admirals. They smiled at her with teeth that cost more than planets. They assumed she was still one of them, a creature of ambition and fluid morals. She accepted a glass of blue wine. She laughed at a joke about a famine in the outer rim. And all the while, she checked the time on her internal HUD, counting the seconds until Kaito dropped the facade. 3 levels down. The marble gave way to brushed steel and the smell of jasmine turned to the copper tang of fear. The guards threw Kaito into a holding cell. The magnetic collar around his neck hummed, heavy and cold. "He stays here until the curator is ready for him." The lead guard grunted. Do not bother struggling. That collar is quantum locked. If you move more than 5 feet, it detonates. The guards laughed and walked away, sealing the force field behind them. Kaito waited exactly 10 seconds. He listened to their footsteps fade. He listened to the hum of the ventilation. He reached up to his neck. He did not have a key. He did not have a lockpick. But he had knowledge. He knew that the Meridian Crown used standard military-grade suppression tech. And he knew that every magnetic lock had a resonant frequency where the fail-safe disengaged to prevent accidental detonation during power surges. He began to hum. It was a low, dissonant tone originating from the back of his throat. He pitched it perfectly against the vibration of the collar. He felt the metal vibrate against his larynx. He adjusted the pitch, sliding it lower, finding the harmonic flaw in the manufacturing. The collar clicked. The light on the front turned from angry red to a confused yellow. Kaito snapped his neck back. The collar popped open, falling into his hand. He moved. He did not run. He flowed. He stepped through the force field's emitter array at the precise millisecond the cycle refreshed. A trick that required timing that bordered on precognition. He was out. He moved through the corridors like a rumor. He avoided cameras by walking in the blind spots created by their own rotation. He bypassed patrols by hanging from the ceiling piping, waiting for them to pass beneath him. His breathing slowed to a near stop. He was not just escaping. He was hunting. Saren excused herself from a conversation with an admiral who was explaining the economic benefits of forced labor. "I must freshen up before the broadcast," she said, flashing a charming conspiratorial smile. She walked calmly toward the powder room, checked the hallway, and then sprinted toward the service access panel she had noted on the schematic Krell had carelessly left open on his desk. She hacked the lock in 3 seconds. She was inside the maintenance shafts, sliding down a ladder into the belly of the beast. She met Kaito at the rendezvous point, a junction of cooling pipes overlooking the central chamber. "You are late," Kaito whispered, dropping from the darkness above her. "I had to listen to Admiral Vex explain why he is actually a humanitarian." Saren hissed. It took longer than expected to not stab him. They looked down through the grating. The central loom chamber was vast. It looked like the inside of a clockwork brain. In the center stood the loom itself, a massive rotating pillar of light and crystal, weaving threads of neural energy into complex patterns. Around the base of the loom were hundreds of pods. Inside them were people. Kaito adjusted his optical zoom. He saw faces he recognized, not just criminals or dissidents. He saw a famous investigative journalist who had gone missing 2 years ago. He saw a scientist who had supposedly died in a lab accident. They are not just erasing people, Kaito realized, a cold horror gripping him. Look at the readouts. Saren tapped into the data stream. Her eyes widened. Subject 8904, former identity, dissident leader. New identity, loyal martyr. Subject 7721, former identity, pirate. New identity, sector hero. They are manufacturing them, Saren whispered. They are not just removing dissent. They are creating the opposition. They are creating the heroes. They are writing the entire history of the galaxy in real time, using people as ink. There, Kaito pointed. In the center of the room, strapped to a raised dais, was Mason Hale. He looked small in the massive chair. His eyes were taped open. Above him, a holographic script scrolled in 20 different languages. I, Ambassador Mason Hale, confess to the crimes of the Sol system. I admit that Earth planned the assassination of the High Council. We are a plague. We must be contained. The curator, the same slender alien from the carnival ship, was adjusting the needles at Hale's temples. We have 10 minutes before the broadcast, Saren said. Kaito drew a combat knife he had lifted from a guard. Then we make them count. They dropped from the ceiling. Kaito landed on the back of a technician, silencing him before he hit the ground. Saren used her wrist blade, the hard light cutting through the control console, severing the connection to the alarms. They moved toward the dais. The curator turned, his eyes widening. "You!" the curator gasped. Kaito didn't pause for banter. He struck the curator with the pommel of his knife, knocking the alien unconscious. "Hail!" Kaito shouted, ripping the restraints off the diplomat's wrists. Hale looked at him. The man's eyes were swimming with artificial purpose. "The broadcast," Hale mumbled. I must warn them about Earth." "You are Earth," Kaito said, grabbing Hale's face. "You are Mason Hale. You have a son named Mark who hates ballet. Wake up." He cut the final strap. A siren screamed. It wasn't a general alarm. It was a specific piercing wail that came from Hale's own chair. Unauthorized extraction detected. A computerized voice announced, "Protocol Omega initiated." The doors to the chamber slammed shut. The blast shields descended over the observation windows. "Atmospheric venting in 30 seconds, the voice said. "Sanitization in progress." "They rigged him," Saren shouted, running to the main terminal. "The chair is a dead man's switch. If he is removed before the broadcast, the room kills everyone." "Get the doors open," Kaito yelled, dragging Hale off the dais. Saren's fingers flew across the holographic interface. The code was complex, a shifting algorithm of meridian encryption. She tore through the firewalls, her mind working at a speed that surprised even her. She reached the root directory. She found the override, but she found something else. A file caught her eye. It was tagged with a biometric marker that she recognized. It was her own retinal pattern. She froze. The oxygen levels were dropping. The air was getting thin. "Saren!" Kaito shouted. "Open the door!" Saren stared at the file. Subject, Vala Saren. Correction date, cycle 44. Adjustment, empathy modulation, loyalty index, absolute. It was true. The fear she had confessed in the temple was real, and she wasn't just recruited. She had been edited. The gaps in her childhood were not accidents. They were deletions. Her loyalty to the council wasn't a choice. It was code. She stepped back from the console, her hands shaking. "I am one of them," she whispered. "I am a machine. Everything I feel, everything I am, it is just a program." "Saren!" She looked at Kaito. The despair on her face was total. "Why should I open the door? I am just a tool. I should let us die. It is the only way to be sure I am not serving them." Kaito dropped Hale and sprinted across the room. He didn't go for the console. He went for her. He grabbed her by the shoulders. The air was thin, making his chest heave. "Look at me," he commanded. Saren shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "It is not real." "Kaito." "I am not real." Kaito shook her. "You are real because you are hurting," he shouted. "A program does not hate itself for following orders. A program does not cry." He held her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "They might have written the first chapter, Vala Saren. They might have edited the middle. But you are holding the pen right now. You are choosing. Right now. In this room. Are you their slave, or are you the woman who laughed at my terrible tea?" Saren stared at him. She saw the desperation in his eyes, the fierce belief that refused to let her drown. She stammered. "Choose," Kaito roared. Saren took a ragged breath. The cold logic of the loom in her head clashed with the burning heat of her own rage. "I choose," she whispered. She spun back to the console. She didn't just open the doors. She slammed her hand into the interface, Override accepted. The blast doors hissed open. Fresh air rushed in. But Saren wasn't done. "They want a story," she said, her voice trembling with fury. "Let's give them a plot hole." She accessed the central loom. She didn't try to shut it down. She knew that would trigger backups. Instead, she accessed the narrative core, the database of identities and loyalties. She pulled Kaito's file. She pulled her own file. She pulled the file of every Meridian agent in the facility. She tied them all together into a data knot. She fed the loom a paradox. She told the system that the Meridian crown was Earth, that Kaito was the High Council, that the slaves were the masters, and that up was down. Logic error, the system droned. Narrative conflict. Rebooting. Rebooting. The loom shuddered. The crystal pillar cracked. A high-pitched scream of feedback tore through the facility. In the pods, people woke up. Not gently. They woke up with their old memories clashing with the new ones. In the corridors, the guards froze. Their earpieces shrieked with contradictory orders. "We broke it," Kaito said, watching the chaos unfold on the screens. "We didn't just break it," Saren said, stepping back from the console, her eyes burning with a terrifying light. "We drove it insane. Now we run," Kaito said. He grabbed Hale, who was weeping silently on the floor. They sprinted into the hallway. The facility was in anarchy. Officials were wandering the halls, clutching their heads, screaming names that didn't belong to them. Slavers were panicking, firing weapons at shadows. Meridian Crown agents, the ones with the highest level conditioning, were moving to contain the leak. That meant killing everyone. "Contact front," Kaito yelled. A squad of elite agents blocked the corridor. They were flanked by floating surveillance orbs, cameras meant to record the confessions of the broken. Kaito dropped Hale behind a pillar and drew his knife. Saren ignited her light blade. They moved as one. It was a dance of violence in a hall of mirrors. Kaito slid under a plasma bolt, slashing the hamstrings of the first agent. Saren vaulted over him, her blade a blur of blue light, deflecting fire and striking with precision. The surveillance orbs buzzed around them, trying to capture the footage for the official record. Kaito grabbed an agent by the vest and threw him into a cluster of orbs. Metal shattered. "Smash the eyes," Kaito shouted. "Don't let them edit this." Saren spun, her blade extending into a whip of hard light. She slashed through the air, cleaving 3 orbs in half. They fought back to back. Kaito covered her blind spots. She cleared his path. It wasn't the synchronized routine of soldiers, it was the desperate harmony of 2 people who refused to die. They reached the elevator bank. The path to the hangar was clear. Kaito slammed the call button. He looked at Saren. She was covered in soot and alien blood, her armor cracked, her hair wild. She had never looked more beautiful to him. The elevator arrived. It was too small for 3. Kaito looked at the readout. Another car was coming in 30 seconds. "Take Hale," Kaito said. "Take the first car. Get him to the ship." "What?" Saren grabbed his arm. "No. We go together." "The agents are regrouping," Kaito said, nodding down the hall where heavy reinforcements were gathering. "Someone has to hold the corridor. If they breach the elevator shaft, they will shoot the car down." "I am not leaving you," Saren screamed. Kaito grabbed the back of her neck and pulled her to him. He kissed her. It wasn't a movie kiss. It was desperate, bloody, and tasted of ozone and fear. It was a collision of souls. For a second, the sound of plasma fire faded. He pulled back, his forehead resting against hers. "It is not a goodbye, Vala Saren," he said fiercely. "It is a tactic. Get Hale to the ship. Spin up the engines. I will take the second car." Saren looked at him, her chest heaving. She saw the resolve in his eyes. She knew he was right. She shoved Hale into the elevator. She turned back to Kaito. If you make me wait, she threatened, her voice breaking, I will come back down here and kill you myself. I'll be right behind you, Kaito promised. The doors closed. Kaito turned to face the corridor. He spun his knife. Okay, he muttered to the advancing army. Let's edit the runtime. Saren dragged Hale into the shuttle bay. The stolen Meridian craft was where they left it. She threw Hale into the pilot's seat. Can you fly? She screamed at him. Hale looked at his hands. I think so. I used to fly Cessnas. This is a spaceship. Mason, figure it out. She ran to the ramp, weapon raised, waiting for Kaito. The elevator dinged. Kaito sprinted out. He was limping. His suit was smoking. He was pursued by a storm of laser fire. He dove up the ramp as bolts chewed up the floor plates behind him. Go! Kaito yelled. Saren slammed the airlock. Hale punched the throttle. The ship lurched, tearing free of the docking clamps and blasting out of the hidden bay. They shot into the traffic of the capital sector. Kaito collapsed against the bulkhead, sliding down to the floor. He was breathing hard, clutching his side. Did we get it? Saren asked, dropping to her knees beside him. Kaito reached into his pocket. He pulled out a data drive. It pulsed with a chaotic red light. We got everything, he wheezed. The loom's core data, the names, the bribes, the script. Hale turned from the cockpit. His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. Please, Hale whispered. His voice was trembling. Don't let me do it. Don't let me be the weapon. I can feel the words in my head. They want me to say them. Kaito looked at the diplomat. He saw a man hanging onto his soul by a thread. You won't say them. Kaito promised. You are done with scripts. Promises don't stop politics, Hale said miserably. No, Saren said, standing up. But the truth stops lies. She plugged the data drive into the ship's comms array. Where are we broadcasting? Kaito asked. Everywhere, Saren said. But specifically, the council chamber, in the Grand Council chamber. The emergency session had begun. The room was a vast amphitheater of floating pods. At the center stood High Counselor Valerius. He was a figure of immense gravity, wearing robes of white and gold. He was the face of the Meridian crown. He was the man who had publicly condemned slavery for 50 years while building his empire on the backs of the erased. My fellow sentients, Valerius boomed, his voice amplified to reach the rafters. We face a crisis of unprecedented scale. The terrorist state of Earth has infiltrated our sacred halls. They have abducted Ambassador Hale. They have attacked our security forces. The crowd murmured in fear. They leave us no choice. Valerius continued, raising his hands in false sorrow. I propose a motion to invoke Article 55. We must quarantine the Sol system. We must authorize the Meridian fleet to restore order. The vote was called. The pods began to light up. Green for yes, green for war. And then, the screens changed. Every holographic banner, every personal data pad, every massive display in the atrium flickered. Static hissed. Then, a file opened. It wasn't a video. It was a raw data dump from the loom. It started with names. Vala Saren. Correction. Empathy modulation. Then it showed the bribes. High Counselor Valerius. Payment. 50 million credits. Source. Velvet Chain. Then it showed the script. The very words Valerius had just spoken. Written 10 years ago in a planning document. The chamber went silent. The murmurs died. Valerius froze on the podium. He looked at the giant screen behind him, where his own secret ledger was scrolling for the galaxy to see. On the shuttle, Saren watched the feed. She saw the confusion, she saw the shock, and then she saw the anger. It's out, she whispered. Kaito pulled himself up to the viewport. He watched the station receding in the distance. The cliffhanger wasn't whether they would survive. The cliffhanger was whether the galaxy would survive the truth. Valeria screamed for the feed to be cut, but it was too late. The data was viral. It was bouncing from ship to ship, system to system. The ninja and the traitor had lit a match, and now they were watching the fire spread. The Grand Council chamber was not designed for debate. It was designed for spectacle. It was a colossal hollowed-out sphere located at the very heart of the station, lined with thousands of floating pods that drifted like bioluminescent jellyfish in a dark sea. In the center, suspended by grav beams, was the speaker's platform. A disk of white marble that served as the stage for the galaxy's most polite and devastating lies. High Counselor Valerius stood on the platform, his robes of white and gold catching the stark spotlights. He looked every inch the grieving statesman. Behind him, massive holographic projectors painted the air with images of chaos. "They show us terror," Valerius boomed, his voice amplified to rattle the teeth of every delegate in the room. "They show us a human assassin, a creature of shadow, slaughtering our peacekeepers. They show us a traitor, Saren Voss, a woman we once trusted, seducing her way through our defenses to aid this monster." The holograms shifted. They showed edited clips of Kaito fighting in the carnival ship, brutal, efficient, stripped of context. They showed Saren laughing with Kaito in the safe house, the audio twisted to make it sound like they were plotting mass murder rather than surviving it. The crowd in the pods roared. It was a sound of manufactured outrage, a symphony of fear conducted by a master. Valerius raised his hands. And now, they spread lies. They broadcast fabricated data, claiming that we, are the corrupt ones. They try to stain the Meridian crown with mud to hide their own blood. I ask you, fellow sentients, will you let Earth dictate our truth? Or will you authorize the blockade? "Blockade!" the delegates chanted. "The blockade!" The vote counters on the walls began to tick upward. Green lights flooded the chamber. The authorization for war was seconds away. Then, the main doors at the base of the sphere did not just open, they were blown off their magnetic hinges. The sound was like a thunderclap in a library. The chanting died instantly. Thousands of heads turned. Kaito Ryu walked in. He was not hiding. He was not blending in. He was not wearing the courier's duster or the servant's velvet. He wore his tactical armor, scorched and battered from the fight in the facility. He wore his weapons openly, the katana at his hip, the flashbangs on his belt. But most importantly, he wore his own face. The biometric veil was gone. He walked into the light, a human weapon who refused to be a ghost any longer. Beside him walked Saren Voss. She was a ruin of imperial elegance, her gown torn, her face smeared with soot, but she held her head high enough to wear a crown. And between them, supported by their arms, walked Mason Hale. The diplomat was pale, trembling, looking as if a stiff breeze would shatter him, yet he put one foot in front of the other. "Guards!" Valerius screamed, pointing a trembling finger. "Kill them! They are armed!" The security drones hovered, weapons locking on. "Hold!" Saren's voice cut through the air. It was not a shout, it was a command, honed by years of diplomatic training. She stepped forward, leaving the cover of Kaito's silhouette. She looked up at the floating pods, at the thousands of eyes judging her. "I invoke the truth wager," Saren declared. A gasp rippled through the chamber. The truth wager was an archaic piece of council law, a remnant of a time when honor mattered more than credits. It was a challenge that could not be refused without admitting guilt. It stated that an accuser could present evidence directly to the record, but if the evidence was proven false, the accuser would be executed on the spot. Valerius gripped the podium. That protocol is obsolete. This is a secure session. It is the law, Saren shouted back. Unless the High Counselor wishes to admit that his emergency powers supersede the Charter itself, the delegates murmured. To refuse the wager was to declare oneself a dictator. Valerius saw the trap. He sneered, confident in his narrative. Let her speak, Valerius said, his voice dripping with venom. Let her hang herself with her own lies. Saren turned to Kaito. He nodded. He pulled the data drive from his belt, the drive containing the raw core of the persona loom, and slotted it into the interface terminal at the base of the arena. The holograms behind Valerius flickered. The edited footage of the assassin vanished. In its place, a waterfall of data cascaded down the screens. It was not just numbers. It was names. Senator Yoren, bribe accepted, 12 million credits. Service, vote manipulation, Admiral Krell, bribe accepted, 3 planetary governorships. Service, ignoring slaver routes. Subject, Mason Hale. Status, kidnapped. Purpose, false flag operation. The chamber erupted. This was not a vague accusation, this was the receipt. It showed the bank routing numbers. It showed the dates. It showed the video files of the bribes being handed over. Saren's voice rose above the chaos. You wanted a villain. Valerius? Look at the screen. You built a machine to rewrite souls because you were terrified that people would choose freedom over your order. Valerius was pale, sweating under the lights. These are forgeries, deep fakes created by the Earth AI, then ask the witness, Kaito roared. He pushed Hale forward. The diplomat stood alone in the center of the arena. He looked small against the towering screens. He looked up at Valerius, the man who had ordered his mind to be shredded. Hale, Valerius said, his voice dropping to a soothing, hypnotic register. The loom's programming was deep. The trigger words were still buried in Hale's psyche. Remember your duty, Ambassador. Remember the threat. Tell them about Earth. Hale squeezed his eyes shut. He swayed. The script scrolled behind his eyelids. Earth is a plague, I must confess. Kaito did not step in. He watched Hale. He knew that if he forced this, it would mean nothing. Hale had to break the chain himself. Hale opened his eyes. He looked at the camera drone hovering in front of him. My name, Hale whispered. Speak up, a delegate shouted from a pod. My name is Mason Hale, the ambassador said, his voice cracking, then strengthening. I have a son named Mark who hates ballet. I have a wife who wants to cut down the oak tree. I am not a symbol. I am a man. He pointed a shaking finger at Valerius. That man, that faction. They stole me. They put me in a chair and they tried to cut out the parts of me that loved my family so they could fill the hole with hate. They wanted me to start a war so they could profit from the peace. Hale looked around the room, tears streaming down his face. Earth did not send an assassin. Earth sent a rescuer, and the Council sent a monster. The silence that followed was absolute. The truth, spoken with the raw, jagged edge of trauma, cut through the politics like a knife. Valerius looked at the faces of his allies. He saw them turning away. He saw the vote counters freezing. He was losing. And Valerius was a man who believed that if he could not rule the house, he would burn it down. He reached under the podium and pressed a sequence on a hidden keypad. I tried to save you, Valerius whispered into the microphone. But you are too sick to be saved. You must be sanitized. A low hiss filled the chamber. From the ventilation ducts high in the ceiling, a shimmering mist began to descend. It wasn't smoke. It was a micro-aerosol, a cloud of nanoscopic fibers designed to interface with the neural tissue of anyone who inhaled it. It was a mass-scale loom edit, weaponized to wipe the short-term memory of everyone in the room. Kaito smelled the ozone before he saw the mist. "The vents!" Kaito shouted. "Don't breathe!" The delegates panicked. Pods collided as they tried to flee, but the doors were sealed. "It's invisible!" Saren cried, looking at the shimmering air. "We can't fight what we can't see." Kaito reached into his pouch. He pulled out a handful of small, metallic spheres, the stillness beads he had used in the carnival ship, but modified. He didn't throw them at an enemy. He threw them into the air above the arena floor. "Ionize," Kaito commanded. Kaito. The beads detonated, not with fire, but with a pulse of static charge. The effect was instantaneous. The invisible neural threads in the air were magnetized. They clumped together, instantly turning from an invisible gas into a heavy, glittering silver dust. The air was suddenly filled with falling snow. Silver, deadly snow. Now we can see it. Kaito grimaced. Valerius slammed his fist on the podium. "Kill them! Do not let them leave!" From the shadows beneath the podium, the champion emerged. He was a towering hulk of bioengineered muscle, clad in the gold armor of the Meridian Guard. He wielded a gravity hammer that crackled with purple lightning. Saren drew her wrist blade. The hard light snapped into existence, a defiant blue line in the silver storm. "Get Valerius," she told Kaito. "I will handle the muscle." Kaito didn't argue. He moved. The battle that followed was a kinetic nightmare fought on shifting ground. The floating pods were drifting aimlessly in the panic, creating a three-dimensional maze of moving platforms. Kaito leaped from a railing to a passing pod, using the momentum to swing up toward the speaker's platform. Meridian guards jetted down to intercept him. Kaito fought with a terrifying economy of motion. He didn't kill. He dismantled. He disarmed a guard, used the man's own momentum to throw him into another, and then unleashed a barrage of stun batons. He moved through the falling silver dust like a brushstroke of ink, leaving unconscious bodies in his wake. Below him, Saren engaged the champion. It was a duel of finesse against brute force. The champion swung the gravity hammer, smashing a marble bench to dust. Saren ducked under the swing, her light blade carving a furrow in his gold armor. She was fast, but she was exhausted. Every parry jarred her bones. "You are a traitor," the champion grunted, swinging the hammer in a wide arc. Saren backflipped, landing on a floating media drone. "And you are a statue," she retorted, "pretty hollow and about to be toppled." She waited for the next strike. As the hammer came down, she didn't dodge away. She dodged in. She slid between his legs, slashing the hydraulic servos in his knee joints. The champion roared, his leg buckling. As he fell, Saren spun and delivered a high-voltage kick to his helmet, shorting out his HUD. He crashed to the floor, a mountain of gold brought low. Above, Kaito reached the platform. Valerius backed away, pulling a disruptor pistol from his robes. "Stay back!" Valerius screamed. "I am the council!" Kaito dodged the shot with a tilt of his head. He closed the distance in 2 steps. He grabbed the pistol, twisted it from Valerius's grip, and kicked the High Counselor in the chest. Valerius flew backward, hitting the base of his own throne. Kaito stood over him, breathless. The silver dust coated his black armor like frost. "You know," Kaito wheezed, wiping sweat from his eyes. "Diplomacy would be a lot easier if everyone just agreed to stop trying to poison the room." Saren leaped up to the platform, landing beside him. Her light blade hummed near Valerius's throat. "Do it!" Valerius hissed, looking up at her with hateful eyes. "Kill me. Make me a martyr. The Meridian crown will rise from my blood." Saren looked at him. She looked at the blade in her hand, the weapon of an assassin, the tool of the darkness she had lived in for so long. Then she looked at the cameras, which were still broadcasting to the galaxy. She deactivated the blade. "No," Saren said coldly. Martyrs are remembered. You are just going to be data. She tapped her comlink. She didn't call the council security. She broadcast a set of coordinates on an open channel. Attention all independent systems, Saren announced. I am transmitting the location of the Meridian Crown's hidden facility. I am transmitting the codes to the loom. Go see for yourselves. She looked down at Valerius. I am not giving you death, High Counselor. I am giving you transparency. The one thing you cannot survive. Valerius slumped, defeated not by a sword but by the weight of being seen. The aftermath was not a neat ending. It was a fracture. The council did not collapse, but it broke. The revelation of the loom terrified the neutral blocks. The vote for emergency powers was not just blocked, it was incinerated. A coalition of outer rim systems formed an immediate blockade around the Meridian sector, demanding inspections. Valerius was arrested, not by Saren but by his own junior staff, who were desperate to distance themselves from the scandal. Across the galaxy, the velvet chain felt the shockwave. The coordinates Saren leaked didn't just expose the political facility, they exposed the entire slaver network. Raids began within the hour. Earth fleets, working alongside alien militias, hit the slave markets on the carnival ships and the asteroid bazaars. The news feeds showed the liberation. They showed thousands of beings stumbling out of cages, blinking in the light of real suns. It was messy. It was chaotic. The healing for the victims of the loom would take decades. Minds that had been edited could not simply be rebooted. They had to be relearned, stitched back together with patience and therapy. But they were free to start the work. 2 days later, the station was quiet. The silver dust had been scrubbed from the air, but the smell of ozone lingered. Kaito stood in a viewing corridor on the outer ring, looking at the stars. He was out of armor, wearing simple civilian clothes that felt strange on his skin. His arm was in a sling. He heard footsteps. He didn't turn. He knew the cadence. Saren walked up beside him. She was wearing a plain tunic, stripped of her council finery. She looked tired, but her eyes were clear. Hale is on a transport back to Earth, she said. He remembers his son's birthday. It is a start. Kaito nodded. And you? The council wants to give you a medal and a trial. They haven't decided which order yet. Saren laughed softly. I resigned this morning. I told them I was retiring to pursue a career in aggressive gardening. She turned to face him. She reached out and touched the bandage on his arm, then traced the line of the scar on his cheek, the one he had revealed to her in the temple. Her touch was light, reverent. It was like she was reading a book written in Braille. You are leaving, she said. It wasn't a question. My mission is done, Kaito said. Vance wants a debrief. And then, Kaito looked at her. He took her hand, the one resting on his face, and brought it to his lips. He kissed her knuckles, a slow, deliberate gesture that felt more intimate than anything they had done in the dark. Then, Kaito said, I have a standing appointment at a tea shop in Kyoto. I hear the company is exceptional, even if the tea is just okay. Saren's breath hitched. She stepped closer. They were not touching, except for his hand on hers, but the air between them crackled with the electricity of everything they had survived. It won't be easy, she whispered. You are a ghost. I am a public enemy. The Meridian remnants will hunt us. I know, Kaito said. We might never be safe, she added. I know, he repeated. He looked deep into her teal eyes. We don't do this because it is easy, Vala Saren. We do it because the alternative is sleeping while the world burns. Saren nodded. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she was smiling. Love isn't an escape. She agreed, echoing the lesson they had carved out of the ice and blood. It is a reason to stay alive. It is the fuel for the harder right thing. She leaned in, and this time, the kiss was not desperate. It was soft. It was a promise. It tasted of hope. I will see you in Kyoto. Ryu, she whispered against his lips. Don't be late. I am never late, Kaito murmured. I am just stealthy. He stepped back, releasing her hand. He walked toward the airlock, melting into the shadows of the corridor, not because he had to, but because it was his nature. Saren watched him go. She didn't feel abandoned. She felt anchored. She turned back to the window, looking at the vast, messy, beautiful galaxy. She had a lot of work to do. The story did not end in a council chamber or a bedroom. It ended on the screens of 1 billion data pads across the Orion spur. A news drone hovered over the skyline of a liberated slave city, capturing the image of a human transport ship lifting off, carrying the broken but living Ambassador Hale back home. The anchor's voiceover played in 12 languages, translating the headline that had become the defining legend of the era. It was a warning to tyrants. It was a comfort to the lost. It was a simple statement of fact that sounded like a myth. The whisper spread through the subspace channels, from the high towers of Vale to the mud pits of the Outer Rim. Galactic slavers took a human diplomat hostage. Earth answered with a ninja,